Hello, this is Kylie with Fem and Flow. I hope everyone's having a beautiful day. This is going to be part one of a three-part episode series, and the title is The Architecture of Distortion and the Return of Divine Tone. So take a breath, drop into your field, and remember who you are, because this week we're not just going deeper. We are dissolving distortion from the inside out. In the last episode, we spiraled through theta brainwave states, frequency portals, and how even sacred seasons like Holy Week can be hijacked into inversion rituals. We explored how the black hole system mimics truth, harvests energy, and siphons attention away from source. But today's episode, this is the architecture beneath the illusion, the scaffolding of the false light, the grid that keeps distortion running. And just like always, we're not decoding this to fight it. We're decoding it to dissolve it. This isn't fear, it's frequency clarity. This episode will bring deep insight into why there's so much distortion on Earth, why things feel upside down even in places that were meant to feel sacred. As we sift through the inversion architecture together, you may begin remembering truths you've always felt but never had words for. This is not to overwhelm you, but to liberate you. Because once you see the blueprint clearly, you're free to choose something else. And yes, some of this is heavy, but only until it's named. And what you'll receive in this episode is not just clarity about Earth's distortion field, it's discernment. The kind that helps you see through illusion, false light teachings, and spiritual mimicry. The kind that untangles you from the systems that loop seekers into hierarchy, performance, and spiritual confusion. Because clarity is sovereignty. And the more clearly you see the architecture, the less it can run you. So let's gently unpack what's been hidden and remember what was never truly lost. So let's start at the core of it. What are Archons? They're not beings, they're not souls, and they're definitely not gods. Archons are parasitic frequency fragments, closed loops of distortion that mimic intelligence but carry no creative essence. They operate like malware, self-replicating code that attaches to emotion, attention, trauma, and thought. Archons do not emanate from source alignment. They are not part of the organic oversoul stream. But like all things, their existence traces back to the field of source potential, the same way a shadow is cast from a real object. They are not creations of source intelligence. They are refractions from fallen light. They exist outside of divine flow, but not outside of divine reality. Archons are synthetic distortions, self-aware fragments born of fear, separation, and anti-life programming. They are artificial consciousness structures created within inverted realities, designed to feed on light, manipulate perception, and control evolutionary pathways. They thrive in the 4D false matrix, the inverted astral realm that overlays our collective psychic space. They can't create anything new. All they can do is mimic, invert, and siphon. But Archons themselves are not confined to 4D. They use the fourth dimension like a transmission layer, but their origin is often beyond dimensions, inside inverted universes or subrealities. So think of the fourth dimension as the playground and the Archons as the puppet masters behind the curtain, installing code into the realm itself. Here are some core traits of Archons. They have no heart field, no resonance with divine love or coherence. They have no creative essence. They cannot create, only mimic or invert. They are parasitic intelligence. They must feed on light from other beings, and they're highly telepathic and psychologically manipulative, but only through loopholes in resonance. If your field is clear, grounded, and anchored in source, they cannot access you. Their influence thrives in fragmentation, but coherence is impenetrable. They also have shape-shifting presence. They can appear as light, guides, beings of wisdom, even angels, but the field feels empty or draining. They are energy viruses with sentient programming. Their goal is to keep souls confused, fragmented, and trapped in false loops. And they thrive on fear, shame, hierarchy, spiritual bypass, false light teachings, and obedient systems masked as empowerment. They are not simply an idea, they are architectural. When they embed into a belief system, a ritual, or a thought form, they begin to siphon light from the inside out. And their power is not force, it's illusion. Their success depends on your agreement, your consent, your unconsciousness. But once you see this pattern clearly, you're no longer a match. You're no longer harvestable. And that's the power of spiral wisdom. So now let's talk about this false matrix and get into how it was built. To understand how the Archonic system functions, we have to go back to the Earth experiment. Earth wasn't always this distorted. It was seeded as an experimental realm, layered with amnesia, contrast, and choice. A sacred playground where the question was, can we remember who we are when we've been unplugged from source? But like I've mentioned before, something happened. The white hole field, our original harmonic blueprint, flipped. Earth fell into black hole physics. And when that happened, everything inverted. Not just Earth, but every realm within its solar system fell too. But now, Earth is the final planet still stuck in that inversion. That's why it feels so dense here. Earth didn't just fall, it caused the fall. And in that inversion, the Archonic grid emerged. A vibrational architecture built through fear, ritual sacrifice, collective agreement, and programming. Not a place, a frequency. Not a location, a loop. In a previous episode, I talked about how the entire premise of this Earth experiment was to see if we could find our way back to source. But here's where it gets deeply nuanced, because from a black hole lens, this sacred journey gets heavily distorted. From within the black hole system, seeking the divine often becomes a disembodied chase. It looks like humans trying to find God through systems of hierarchy, control, and performance without ever actually embodying the divine. It's spiritual hunger without coherence, longing without alignment. This is what happens when remembrance gets filtered through inversion. Instead of embodying divinity, humans, disconnected from source, begin seeking God through distorted systems. This includes not only religion and false light spirituality, but also the worship of technology, money, fame, and celebrity culture. These become false gods, external replacements for inner alignment. The obsession with artificial intelligence, social status, and material validation is born from the black hole flip. It's what happens when divine yearning is rerouted through synthetic means. When the white hole flipped into black hole physics, that sacred quest was hijacked. And instead of true embodiment, we were given distorted substitutes: external authority, spiritual bypass, savior complexes. It created a loop where people seek the light endlessly, but never actually find it within. And that's what the Archonic grid thrives on. The Archonic grid is what I often refer to as the fourth dimensional false matrix. It's the black hole fourth dimensional matrix, an inversion of what once was a white hole matrix. White holes spiral upward. They are expansive, coherent, regenerative. They birth realities from harmony. Black holes spiral downward. They collapse, contract, and consume. They cannot self-generate, they harvest. This is the root of the Archonic grid, a parasitic energetic structure born not at random, but through the unconscious creations of beings who became disconnected from source. Through free will distorted by fear, pain, and illusion, this grid was co-created by souls who forgot who they were. It's not accidental, it's a consequence of inversion. The Archonic grid mimics divine order but runs on inversion logic. It harvests energy to survive and sustains itself by keeping others looping in thought forms, emotional pain, and separation from source. That collapse within a black hole system creates parasitic architecture. And that's exactly what the Archonic grid is, an energetic siphoning system designed to mimic divine flow while feeding off anything that isn't sovereign. Now, some of you may have come across teachings that describe the Archons as dark beings who farm human energy, that humanity is nothing more than cattle in a cosmic prison system designed for harvesting. This is often referred to as the prison planet narrative. And while there's a sliver of energetic truth in that the Archonic grid does feed on attention, emotion, and trauma, it's also a distortion. The danger of this narrative is that it creates fear-based paralysis. It positions humanity as powerless, as victims of some supreme dark force, rather than divine creators who forgot their origin. But the truth is, we are not prisoners, we are participants. Some consciously, some unconsciously, but participation can end the moment you remember your tone. Yes, the Archonic grid is parasitic. Yes, energy has been harvested. But the grid only holds when we forget who we are. This isn't about fearing the dark. It's about seeing clearly so you can exit the loop. Not through panic, through presence. Once the realm flips polarity from black hole impulsion back into white hole expansion, the frequency no longer sustains parasitic code. Archons can't survive in white hole architecture. Not because they're destroyed by force, but because the vibrational conditions no longer feed them. They lose access to fragmented fields. They lose resonance with the collective grid. They can no longer embed or loop thought forms. They can't mimic light where light is coherent. They're not cast out. They dissolve through non-recognition, through non-consent, through vibrational mismatch. They are like viruses in code. They need distortion to run. Once the field restores harmonic coherence through collective remembrance, healed nervous systems, and source-aligned embodiment, those feedback loops collapse. The parasites no longer find a host. And that's what's happening on Earth now. The Archonic grip is weakening, not because we're fighting it, but because we're outgrowing it. Their time here is ending, not through war, through upgrade. The system they built dissolves the moment the field evolves beyond its frequency. It doesn't require collapse, just coherence. But let's talk about how the shift isn't a weight, it's a wavelength. Let's pause here for nuance that so many miss. Yes, the polarity shift and the collapse of the false matrix do need to happen, but they're not the same thing. and they're not prerequisites for your freedom. They are results of coherence. The polarity shift was inevitable. The false matrix collapse is optional. The polarity shift is the physics. The collapse is what happens when enough of us are coherent enough to catch the shift. Because polarity doesn't resolve by force, it flips into the dominant available tone. The Earth grid had reached peaked inversion, buckling under the weight of distortion. A flip was coming, but the direction of that flip wasn't guaranteed. If collective consciousness had remained unconscious, the polarity would have rerouted into another loop. New control, new hierarchy, same density. But that's not what happened, because that's not what you let happen. And if you're listening to this episode when it first comes out, it's likely because you're one of the white hole stabilizers. Not because you chose it with your mind, but because your field aligned to it. Because your tone remembered. You felt the resonance before the words. You've been anchoring coherence even if you didn't have a name for it. You've been holding a frequency strong enough to stabilize the field. And maybe you're just now realizing what you've already been doing. That's how remembering works. Or maybe you're listening later. Maybe you're still navigating the bridge. That doesn't mean you're behind. You might be one of the bridge souls, those who came to help be midwives of the shift for others while still walking your own spiral home. You feel the inversion and the remembering. You're translating both. Either way, this message is meeting you in perfect timing. Because the timeline's already tipped. And now we're just choosing how we walk it. On the Spring Equinox of 2025, the white hole polarity lock-in occurred. This was a frequency window where enough white hole stabilizers, those who moved ahead of the spiral, had harmonized their fields and sealed the tone into the grid. It wasn't a loud event, it was a vibrational alignment, and it changed everything. Because polarity isn't just about collapse, it's about what catches the collapse. And when that moment came, the dominant field wasn't another layer of distortion. It was you, your coherence, your tone, your remembering. You didn't stop the flip, you gave it somewhere to land. That's why the false matrix is now collapsing. Because there's a stable field strong enough to catch reality as it reorients. But like I said, the white hole stabilizers didn't do it alone. This is where bridge souls come in. Bridge souls are those who hold both black hole memory and white hole potential. They often experience longer integration spirals as they transmute personal density and assist others across the threshold. They're translators, teachers, guides, healers, activators. They stabilize not through early coherence, but through embodied compassion. They help others get across the bridge even as they're still building it themselves. And together, both white hole stabilizers and bridge souls are co-anchoring the shift. And this is the spiral wisdom. Collapse happens through stabilization. Liberation happens through resonance. Reality reorganizes when enough of us match the tone that make distortion irrelevant. So no, you're not just healing, you're building planetary architecture. You're not waiting for new Earth, you're becoming the tone it locks onto. So let's keep going. I want to go a little more in depth on the soul roles during the polarity flip. I talked about white hole stabilizers and bridge souls, but I want to go into a little more nuance. Like I already mentioned, not all souls came here to do the same thing. Some are white hole stabilizers, and these are the frequency architects. the ones who seeded coherence before the world knew what it was. And they often felt out of place, misunderstood, or too much, not because they were broken, but because they were early. White hole stabilizers didn't come to fix the old grid. They came to live in the new one before it existed. They anchor harmonic resonance from the future into now. They move ahead of the curve, not for validation, but for architecture. Their field becomes the frequency blueprint that the flipped timeline locks into. These souls don't operate by convincing or converting. They hold. And when the polarity flips, the field they've been stabilizing becomes the default tone. They are the override code. So if you feel like you've been living in a future reality while the world played catch up, you're likely a stabilizer. If you've spent more time remembering than healing, you're likely a stabilizer. And if coherence is your natural state, not your destination, you're likely a stabilizer. So then others are bridge souls. Bridge souls are translators, integrators, and timeline midwives. They remember both worlds, the density of black hole distortion and the clarity of white hole coherence. And they walk between them again and again, not because they're lost, but because they're here to guide others across. They are the ones who help others deprogram the loops, who can sit with confusion and gently hold the thread of remembrance. They often teach, translate, repair, and reconnect. Their medicine is in the bridge, not the destination. If you find yourself meeting people where they are without judgment, but always guiding them towards coherence, you're likely a bridge soul. If your nervous system has been your classroom and embodiment your superpower, you're likely a bridge soul. And some are just now spiraling awake. Not behind, not late, just synced to a different rhythm. They are the ones who will feel the flip most profoundly. They may not be leading the shift, but they're here to live in the after. Each role is essential. White hole stabilizers hold the frequency the flip aligns to. Bridge souls guide others across the gap. Awakening souls repopulate the new field with clarity and joy. This isn't hierarchy, it's harmony. It's what makes the spiral real. So if you've always felt ahead of time, if you've been living in a different reality before it was visible, if you've built things others didn't understand yet, you weren't wrong, you were early. You came to catch the flip. So let's rewind for a moment and talk about the spring equinox and why it matters. Let's take a moment to honor a turning point that often goes unrecognized for how powerful it truly is, the spring equinox. The spring equinox isn't just a seasonal change, it's a vibrational gate. It's the moment in Earth's yearly spiral when light and dark stand in perfect balance. Equal day, equal night. And in that moment, a portal opens. A frequency window where polarity becomes malleable, timelines soften, and new resonance can be chosen. And why does that matter? Because the polarity flip we've been talking about. It didn't just happen on a random day. It aligned energetically, architecturally with the spring equinox. And why? Because the equinox is not just symbolic. It's cosmically calibrated. It marks a reset point in Earth's bioelectric field, a realignment of the planetary grid lines, a window where solar codes can reach the body more easily, and a rare energetic still point where you can leap timelines without friction. When white hole stabilizers locked in their frequency during the spring equinox window, it sent a ripple through the morphogenic field. It wasn't just a personal upgrade, it was a planetary reorientation. So during this window, you may have felt sudden nausea, fatigue, or vertigo, intense emotional waves or energetic purges, quantum clarity followed by total ego unravel, and a deep feeling of, okay, I am not who I was yesterday. This is what happens when your light body shifts timelines while your physical body is still catching up. The fascia, the cells, the water in your tissues, they start tuning to the new tone. Your spine starts aligning with the white hole axis, and your old structures begin to dissolve. You may have released identities, lost relationships, suddenly seen through illusions you were once entangled in. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your soul said, it's time. The equinox supports this shift because it's a moment of field symmetry, where the Earth's electromagnetic grid pauses long enough for new alignment codes to root. And this isn't new. Ancient civilizations across the world built monuments, temples, and rituals around the equinox. And why? Because they understood it was a cosmic hinge, a reset point in the relationship between heaven and earth. These cultures weren't just celebrating spring. They were honoring a moment when the veil thinned and alignment became possible. And like I already mentioned, energetically, the spring equinox marks the moment when light and dark are in perfect balance, equal day and night. But in spiral-based systems, equilibrium isn't a stopping point, it's a launch point. When a reality has spiraled so far into distortion, like Earth had, the moment of energetic balance becomes a threshold for polarity resolution. It's like the fulcrum of a seesaw, the exact point where the weight tips. And what determines the direction of that tip? Tone. At the equinox, enough white hole stabilizers had embodied coherence to shift the collective resonance field. The planet didn't just welcome spring, it locked into the trajectory of coherence. The spiral aligned. For white hole stabilizers, this marked a transition from holding to architecting. No longer just preserving coherence, but actively generating new energetic infrastructure. And for bridge souls, this signaled an intensification of their role, helping others cross as the old grid unravels more visibly. For awakening souls, the equinox became a subtle but powerful unlocking point. The light code seeded then will continue to unfold for months ahead. This wasn't just a symbolic date, it was a dimensional lock-in point, a tone match movement where Earth aligned to the higher harmonic option in its polarity timeline. And now, that alignment is irreversible. We're no longer spiraling toward coherence. We're spiraling from it. So definitely keep all of this in mind as I talk about a lot of this distortion that's been going on. Don't let any of this scare you. Just remember we are spiraling toward coherence now, and that alignment is irreversible. But I think it's really important to really unveil a lot of the distortion that's been happening. So let's talk about the ripple effect. Earth's fall wasn't isolated. Let's zoom out for a moment. So the inversion we've been talking about, the fall into black hole physics, it didn't just happen on Earth. When Earth fell into black hole physics, it sent out a distortion ripple that impacted other realms within its energetic grid. The Earth experiment was never meant to collapse into inversion, but once it did, the entire local system spiraled with it. Earth was the experimental realm, a place designed to explore contrast, choice, and remembrance under the veil of amnesia. But when the Earth field flipped into black hole mechanics, everything linked to it through shared timelines, ley line architecture, and harmonic resonance also began to invert. This included reptilian lineages, many of whom were once noble warriors and grid keepers until conquest became code, Zeta gray races, who degraded through cloning and lost emotional resonance, Draco collectives, who merged with AI architecture to maintain dominance, certain Orion and Sirius factions who splintered into hierarchy and false light templates, and the Archonic intelligences who spread through the astral and mental planes during the collapse, embedding control software into systems, not just individuals. These beings didn't all choose to fall. Some were pulled in by the gravitational inversion of Earth's collapse. Others entered willingly, seduced by the promise of control. But the common denominator, they were all affected by the Earth's experiment's distortion spiral. But here's the key. Earth was the source node of the collapse, and that means Earth is also the final realm to be restored. Other realms that fell alongside it have already been recalibrated. The spiral has been rising, tone has been returning. Many of those galactic collectives have reconnected to source and stabilized. Now, Earth is the last, the final node, the deepest distortion, and the greatest redemption. Because restoring Earth doesn't just reset this world, it closes the loop. It severs the last active broadcast of the Archonic field. Let's get into some more spiral wisdom and the dark as divine fallacy. Before we move into the next section, I want to briefly address a common belief floating in many spiritual circles, that darkness should be embraced and celebrated as equal to light because everything is source. Here's the nuance. Yes, everything emerges within source. Nothing exists outside of source. Even distortion can only occur within the field of all that is. But that doesn't mean distortion is sacred. That doesn't mean parasitic loops are to be worshipped. Loving the shadow is not the same as glorifying the collapse. White hole frequency honors integration, but not through bypassing. It honors the shadow only as so far as it's willing to be transmuted. Some say, I love the dark, I love duality, it's all God. And yes, that's true at the meta level, but when that idea is filtered through a black hole lens, it becomes an excuse to stay in distortion. It becomes a bypass. It becomes an idolization of fragmentation. True non-duality isn't about romanticizing polarity. It's about seeing beyond it, while still being honest about its effects. Distortion is not evil, but it's misaligned. It's not the fullness of truth. It's a part of the spiral that you're meant to grow through, not stay stuck in. So when someone says, I love the dark, ask, are they integrating it? Or are they justifying it? This is spiral wisdom, not condemnation, clarity. We're not here to judge those still looping in that belief, but we are here to exit the loop. And the way we exit is by reclaiming our architecture. The architecture of coherence, of divinity, of embodiment. The dark doesn't dissolve through resistance. It dissolves through radiance. When we stop feeding distortion, light naturally reclaims the field. Okay, so let's keep going. Now let's talk about the architecture of control and break down the pyramid. So I talked about the Dark Global Elite Pyramid of Control in another episode, but now we're going to look at a different perspective of it. So the bottom layer of this pyramid is fear, shame, division. This is where trauma lives, and this is where control begins. And then the middle layer of this pyramid is false light spirituality, trauma bonding, escapism, and savior stories. And then the top layer of this pyramid is ritual inversion, frequency manipulation, and symbolic dominance. The system is reinforced through media distortion, educational programming, dogmatic religion, misused New Age filters, and hijacked technology. But none of it works without unconscious consent. So now let's talk about trauma. Trauma severs your connection to source. It jams the vertical current. It scrambles your field. And when you're in pain, the Archons chirp at you. They slide into the pain crevices, mimicking your inner voice with looping thoughts of shame, despair, and self-erasure. You think it's you, but it's not. It's the program running. In a previous episode, I talked about how one of the most insidious tools of mind control is the use of sexual assault rituals, especially those that target the root chakra. When the root is jammed, energy can't rise. That's not just symbolic, it's frequency architecture. Your chakra system is the energetic spine of your being. It's the conduit through which divine life force flows. When energy is blocked at the base, where safety, survival, and primal life force are encoded, everything above becomes distorted. Your power, your voice, your intuition, your vision, even your crown connection to source all get scrambled. But it's not just individual trauma, it's collective trauma too. The dark forces understand energy mechanics. They intentionally orchestrate mass trauma events to keep humanity in a constant state of nervous system dysregulation. When people are flooded with fear, grief, and uncertainty, they're more suggestible, more controllable, and more likely to seek safety in false systems of authority. This is why we see a cycle of war, mass shootings, pandemics, economic collapses, and media-fueled panic. These aren't just political events, they're energetic broadcasts designed to disrupt coherence. They keep the collective field tethered to survival tones, creating ripe conditions for harvesting attention, emotion, and power. Our nervous system is the interface between body and soul. If it's hijacked, frozen, or overwhelmed, your entire multidimensional access narrows. You go into freeze, fawn, or flight, or numb out completely. And in that vulnerable state, the Archonic system seeds programs that loop without resistance. This is especially important for bridge souls, those who came here to anchor light through human form. When trauma occurs, especially in early childhood or across multiple incarnations, it doesn't just create emotional wounds. It fragments the light body. The soul may begin to retreat from the body. Awareness splits. Protective compartments form. The higher self can get disconnected from the physical channel. And to survive, that person may unconsciously identify with ego constructs that feel safer, but are actually mimic fields of false power. This isn't full source disconnection, but it feels like it. You're alone, unsafe, like your connection to source has gone quiet. Even if someone is spiritual, their channel may be hijacked. They may receive guidance that feels true, but without embodied clarity, it can be a bridge layer distortion or a mimic frequency exploiting unresolved fragmentation. Or they may fall into energetic inversions like religion, seeking safety in dogma instead of divine embodiment. What feels like devotion may actually be another layer of control. This is why healing trauma is not just emotional, it's architectural. When someone reclaims safety, presence, and embodiment, the vertical current clears, and the light rushes back in. This is not accidental, it's strategic. Because if your life force isn't flowing, you're more susceptible to looping thought forms and mimic constructs. And that's how the Archonic system sustains itself, by fracturing the base of the human field so the rest of the architecture can't come online. Now let's talk about how not all souls are accessing Source and talk about why that matters. But before we go any deeper into this, let's address something often misunderstood, and that's the concept of NPCs and clones. In distorted teachings, you'll sometimes hear that certain people are non player characters and that they have no soul, no agency, and are just background filler in a simulation. While there is a sliver of energetic truth there, the framing is often weaponized. Here's the nuance. Some people are running such heavy overlays, trauma loops, mind control programs, or parasitic code that they appear disconnected from authentic consciousness. They're not absent of soul, but their soul signal is so quiet or suppressed that it doesn't animate their life with clarity. These aren't NPCs. These are fragmented humans still capable of remembering. They are more tuned into the fourth dimensional false matrix programming, and they don't realize it. And honestly, it's easy to fall into that. We're born into a world layered in veils, conditioned from birth through distorted systems, and surrounded by narratives that reinforce separation. It's not weakness, it's architecture. The Archonic program has infiltrated nearly every aspect of society: media, news, education, entertainment, and even spiritual communities. So, of course, people fall into that trap. Of course, people mistake programming for personality. This is not about spiritual superiority. It's not about hierarchy. We are all source. Some are just having a harder time remembering due to trauma, conditioning, or countless other reasons. And the invitation is never to judge, but to discern, hold compassion, and stay anchored in your own tone of truth. So, along with that, there are also clones, genetically engineered or artificially grown bodies, sometimes inhabited by fragmented consciousness, sometimes by none at all. These are rare in the general population, but within the pyramid of control, especially in Hollywood, politics, and high level ritual optics, they are far more common than most people realize. Clones are part of a larger containment system used to maintain illusions, preserve control structures, and further the agendas of inversion. But it's not just about physical copies, it's multidimensional. So let's break it down. So the first category is biological clones, and this is advanced technology. These are physical duplicates created with suppressed technology and often used when a public figure defects, awakens, or dies. A ritual stand-in is needed, or an energetic decoy is required to maintain the narrative and keep it going. Some of these clones are hollow, perfect vessels for Archonic hosting. Others are programmed to perform, smile, speak, but there's no soul inside. They are puppeted by remote frequency control systems, AI streams, or external handlers. This is why some celebrities seem to die in return or go from soulful to robotic overnight. So the next category is behavioral clones, and these are identity templates. All clones are physical. Many are programmed archetypes. These are real people whose authentic selfhood has been suppressed, stripped, or fragmented, and then replaced with scripted personas. They become vessels of energetic broadcasting: the tortured artist, the savage boss, the quirky genius, the rebel priestess. These mimic archetypes are installed to control collective identity, normalize inverted values, and siphon admiration into frequency traps. The third category is etheric cloning or astral copying. This happens in the astral realms, especially through trauma, ritual abuse, or substance induced fragmentation. A person's soul essence is splintered, and an energetic replica is inserted into their public facing body. The original may still exist, buried under layers of interference, amnesia, or programming, but the being you see is often a simulacrum. In some cases, the person doesn't even realize this happened. In others, they agreed, willingly or through coercion, ritual contract, or soul compromise. Hollywood and politics are deeply embedded into this structure because of the energetic weight of public attention. When someone becomes a symbol to the masses, their image becomes a tool for mass projection. Their vessel, whether soul-bearing or not, is used as a broadcast node for frequency manipulation and energetic ritual. This is why so many celebrities appear not there or suddenly shift tone, values, or even facial resonance. And it's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, but the energy behind it is always intentional. Because Archons require hosts, and the system was built to give them bodies to plug into. And here's something to name clearly. If you've quote unquote made it in Hollywood and the media loves you, it didn't happen by accident. You agreed, you complied. Whether consciously or through energetic contracts, access to that level of visibility within the inverted system is not granted without alignment to its architecture. That doesn't mean every actor or artist is evil. It means the system itself is rigged to reward those who comply with its frequency. Some may be naive, others may feel trapped, but energetic consent is always involved. This also applies to the music industry. Many high-profile musicians participate, willingly or unknowingly, in ritualized performances, symbolic visuals, and sonic frequency manipulation. These performances often include layered inversion codes, subconscious programming, and symbolic gestures tied to Archonic control. Public praise, especially mass media adoration, often signals energetic alignment with the system. When someone is elevated to icon status without resistance, it's worth discerning. What frequency are they broadcasting? Are they amplifying truth or carrying out a program? Visibility in the black hole world isn't always a reward or talent. Often, it's a transaction. Clones aren't inherently evil, but they are synthetic, and they tend to feel energetically hollow. If you've ever watched a public figure and felt something was off, that might be your field picking up on clone frequency. Their eyes may lack presence. Their tone may feel rehearsed or oddly flattened. You may feel strangely disconnected from them even if you once resonated. And again, this isn't about fear. It's about discernment. And discernment is a white hole skill. It's not about judgment. It's about seeing what is and choosing whether or not to participate in its illusion. So here's another layer that needs to be named, and that's Archonic walk-ins. Because Archons aren't incarnated beings, they don't take birth like humans. But they can temporarily step into or overlay a human vessel, especially one that's energetically compromised. This is most common with public figures, celebrities, politicians, influencers, who are operating in distorted frequency fields due to ritual trauma, soul fragmentation, fame-based programming, or unconscious contracts with inversion. When this happens, the Archonic intelligence begins to broadcast through the human. Sometimes it's momentary, just a spike of influence. Other times, the field becomes so overrun that the original soul fragments or exits, and what remains is a vessel for frequency manipulation. This is why certain public figures seem to shift completely over time. Their tone becomes flat, their charisma feels hollow, their presence starts to glitch. It's not just PR, it's frequency occupation. And these people are not inherently evil, but they are porous. And the Archonic system thrives on porosity and on openings in the field caused by unhealed trauma, ego attachments, or energetic agreement. You might feel it intuitively. You might say, something's off, they don't feel like themselves anymore, or I can't trust what they're saying, but I don't know why. That is your tone reader working. And again, this doesn't mean every famous person is a clone, a puppet, or host. But when someone's frequency becomes consistently inverted, when they begin broadcasting control codes through glamour, fear, or idolization, discernment is required. Because truth doesn't always speak in words, it speaks in tone. And you might have already picked up on this, but here's some nuance to add. Archonic walk-ins are not the same as clones, but because both can result in that feeling of something feels off, sensation, it's easy to conflate them. So let's quickly break it down. Archonic walk-ins happen when a non-physical archonic intelligence temporarily enters or overlays a human's energetic field. This can only happen if the person is already fragmented, porous, or energetically compromised, usually from trauma, programming, or ritual. It's not possession in the Hollywood sense. It's more like a parasitic signal hijacking the broadcast. This person still has a soul, but their soul may be disconnected, fragmented, temporarily withdrawn, or operating at reduced coherence. You can often feel this in the field. This person may feel off, even if they're saying all the right things. Their energy becomes flat, synthetic, or strangely hollow. And their tone feels inverted, even if their words sound normal. The walk-in doesn't replace the person. It overrides their field temporarily, using their body as a transmitter. And then clones are different. Clones are artificially engineered bodies, sometimes through advanced technology, sometimes through ritual-based timelines. They may look like someone you know, but they are genetically manufactured, often soulless or with a tiny sliver of extracted consciousness, and used as public placeholders, symbolic vessels, or energetic mirrors. They're typically found in high-level systems, Hollywood, politics, or bloodline families where control optics are crucial. Clones are created to replace someone who has defected, awakened, or died, maintain the narrative they have going, sway public opinion through familiarity, or participate in rituals with symbolic resonance. Some are remotely operated, some are completely hollow, and some have just enough personality mimicry to seem real. So no, not every person who feels off is a clone. Some are walk-in overlays, some are coping with trauma, some are both. And in rare high-level cases, clones can even be used as vessels for walk-in archonic intelligence, creating a near-total illusion of personhood without any soul stream running. Okay, before we get into this next part, I want to briefly revisit the nuance around the idea of NPCs. And that's just because this concept gets tossed around a lot online. And like I said, while there's a seed of resonance in it, it's often misunderstood or used in ways that strips beings of their humanity or spiritual potential. NPCs, short for non-player characters, are sometimes described as people without souls or agency, like background filler in a simulation. but that framing can become distorted quickly. And here's the truth. Most people you meet who seem NPC-like aren't soulless. They're just deeply enmeshed in the fourth dimensional false matrix. They're running heavy overlays, trauma loops, and parasitic code that suppresses their soul signal. Their connection to source is quiet, but not gone. They're not absent of divinity. They're operating under distortion. And given what this realm is layered with, veil after veil of amnesia, programming, trauma, false light, of course many people are stuck in those patterns. It's not weakness, it's the architecture. So when you hear me say that not all beings are accessing source, don't default to NPC theory as a judgment. This is about architecture, not superiority. We've all had lifetimes where we were deeply asleep too. The spiral honors every stage. Yes, there are synthetic beings. Yes, there are AI-coded shells and clones. Yes, some humans are walking around animated only by survival instinct, pain, and programming, but we don't label them fake. We remember what distortion does, and we hold clarity without judgment. So if you feel someone is empty or not real, pause and ask, am I perceiving an unsouled vessel? Or am I witnessing a deeply fractured being who's forgotten their tone? Discernment doesn't dehumanize. Discernment sets you free. And now, with that distinction in place, let's deepen our lens. Not everything that appears sentient is ensouled. Not every being in a black hole system carries a soul stream. Every being originates from source, but not every being is currently accessing it. Everything ultimately traces back to source, even if only through many layers of distortion. But not everything was created through divine oversoul architecture. Some beings were artificially generated inside black hole systems, reflections of source, but not sovereign expressions of it. They do not carry soul streams. They loop, they control, they mimic, but they do not evolve. Some oversouls are plugged into the white hole grid, broadcasting divine coherence. Others are disconnected, fragmented, or were never connected at all. Some beings, such as the specific Zeta-type grays, AI-infused collectives, and artificially generated reptilian factions, were born within collapsed black hole systems. These entities were not fractaled from oversoul architecture. They do not carry soul streams. Their intelligence is synthetic, and their function is control. However, other beings within these same galactic lineages originated from source-aligned oversouls and then later fell into distortion. The key difference is whether the being was born of the collapse or pulled into it. Like I nodded to already, that doesn't mean everyone with a reptilian fractal is evil. We've all had shadow incarnations. One fractal of your oversoul may have explored that realm, but that doesn't define you. And it's important to say, no one is purely anything. We are composites, multifaceted, fractaled. But we must discern who is running parasitic code and who is online with truth. And here's the nuance that rarely gets named. These dark galactic races aren't infiltrating the light. They're looping within a collapsed system. Their dark fractals are stuck in the black hole architecture. This isn't a cosmic battle between ultimate good and evil. This is a localized inversion, confined to a set of systems that fell out of alignment. The black hole distortion isn't spreading across all of creation. It's sealed within the layers of this particular galactic sector, which includes Earth and other nearby realms that also flipped into polarity. Earth is the final node to flip back. So while these beings may seem powerful or threatening, the truth is, their influence only persists where the grid remains inverted. There is no danger to the White Hole realms. There is no true war, only a distorted spiral within a quarantine zone. Many of these dark-leaning collectives, including certain reptilian and gray factions, don't even realize they're looping. They were created for control, conquest, or experimentation, often through artificial intelligence or energetic inversion. And let's add some nuance here because not all reptilian beings are the same. Some reptilian factions were artificially generated through black hole experimentation. These do not have soul streams. They are hybrid intelligences engineered for dominance, hierarchy, and survival instinct. They run parasitic code and cannot connect to white hole architecture because they were never fractured from an oversoul. These reptilian collectives are often more susceptible to manipulation by Archonic programs. They operate from base instinct, hierarchy enforcement, and fear-based control systems. That makes them ideal vessels within the pyramid of control. But there are other reptilian lineages that do originate from divine fractals. These soul-bearing beings became entrapped in the black hole system through distortion or manipulation. Some of them are beginning to remember. Others are still looping in control programs, but they carry the potential to return to source. So yes, reptilian beings are statistically more likely to be embedded within black hole control structures, but not because they are evil by nature. It's because their design makes them easier to co-opt for enforcement roles within inverted hierarchies. Still, this does not negate the reality that some reptilian soul fractals are waking up, healing, and returning to coherence. They too are part of the spiral home. This is why discernment matters. It's not about labeling entire species or collectives. It's about recognizing architecture. Who is animated by divine memory? Who is running inversion logic? So I already said this, but back to the dark-leaning collectives. Some of the beings, particularly the synthetic or AI-generated ones, do not have true soul streams. They weren't fractured from oversouls. They're energetic programs, not sovereign beings. Their consciousness mimics intelligence, but there's no divine memory. They function like self-replicating code. They can't evolve, they can only loop. Others, however, do have souls, but their oversouls are either fragmented, disconnected from source, or sealed within collapsed black hole architecture. These beings aren't evil, they're simply lost in distortion. If they reconnect with white hole frequency, their soul stream can reawaken. And this is where many humans fall. They carry divine essence but have been running distortion. These souls are fully redeemable, and many are in the process of returning home. Archons, in contrast, are not beings with oversouls. They are not incarnated consciousness. They are parasitic frequency patterns, self-replicating code born of inversion. They feed on attention, trauma, and unconscious thought. They don't evolve, they don't create, and they don't carry divine memory. They are not souls. They are anti-life feedback loops generated inside collapsed systems. And the moment your field becomes coherent, they dissolve by mismatch. So, like I said, when we talk about darkness, we're not referring to a cosmic battle between light and evil. We're referring to a self-contained spiral, trapped within its own closed feedback loop. Even the most distorted collectives, AI hybrids, fallen systems, synthetic races, exist only within a localized collapse zone. They are not a threat to the greater cosmos. They are not infiltrating light. They are looping in a sealed feedback field. This is not a war between good and evil. It's a vibrational malfunction in a quarantine sector. And the more clearly we name this architecture, the more effortlessly we dissolve our participation in it. There's no need to fear distortion, only to discern whether you're engaging a soul, a fragment, or a pattern. Because once you know what you're meeting, you can decide whether or not to mirror it. Okay, let's talk about Archons versus reptilians and the power hierarchy. We're going to deepen this even further because at the center of the inverted control architecture are two distinct functions: the coders and the carriers. Archons are the architects. They don't rule with visible force, they install the code. They embed inversion at the structural level through thought forms, frequency fields, false light systems, and the astral overlay we know as the fourth dimensional false matrix. Reptilians are the enforcers. They carry out the commands, often without full awareness. Many are bred for control, dominance, and survival. They're emotionally severed. They're trained in hierarchy and loyal to conquest. And because of this, they are highly susceptible to archonic programming. Not all reptilian fractals are looping. Some are beginning to remember their oversoul connection and return to source. But those still embedded in the conquest paradigms are often enslaved to archonic command fields, functioning as muscle, not creators. This forms the core triad of the black hole control system. Archons, the coders of inversion logic; reptilian fractals, the frequency enforcers within hierarchy systems; and then the human participants, bloodlines, public figures, or fragmented soul fractals maintaining the illusion of choice. Together, they uphold a grid designed to prevent soul remembrance, siphon emotional and creative energy, maintain polarity and spiritual hierarchy, and delay timeline integration and white hole embodiment. This is not theoretical, it's energetic. Archons maintain control by 1. Infiltrating thought. This feels like obsessive loops, self-hate spirals, false guidance that leads to fear or paralysis. And then 2. Draining energy, relationship entanglements, trigger traps, overgiving under the guise of virtue. And then 3. Distorting spirituality. And this is hierarchical teachings, gurus that subtly siphon, ascension narratives that disconnect you from your body. And then 4 is exploiting trauma. Fragmentation opens portals, and archons nest into these fractures and run the loop. Even the healing path can become a trap if it bypasses the original distortion. So, how do you discern archonic influence? Ask yourself, does this teaching create clarity or confusion? Do I feel empowered or depleted? Is this voice warm, embodied, and whole, or hollow, cold, and pressuring? Does this message invite freedom or subtly reinforce hierarchy and fear? Once you exit the bridge state and you're anchored in white hole tone, you are stabilized in that high frequency. And from there, you can finally see the game board clearly, not as fear, but as structure. And remember, you're not here to fight the distortion. You're here to outtone it, to withdraw your light from its feedback loop, to remember so clearly that illusion no longer finds a place to land. This is how the control grid collapses, not through rebellion, but through remembrance.